My wife tells me that I get too serious when I talk about human settlement and ecology. So I thought I would start with a joke. So what did the salmon think when it ran into concrete? Damn. It's all right as a joke.
Does it name an agency after that?
I'm going the wrong way here. So I'm going to take a few minutes and summarize some aspects of the philosophy and theory behind the ecological accounting process, and also give you a brief summary of a project on Brooklyn Creek that we looked at using that process. And you'll find me using the acronym EAP often in our process rather than the whole ecological accounting process. So we know this is true, and when you think about that, one has to wonder why when we look at human settlement, which is often land development in our concepts, we wonder why that's not done in balance with the conservation of land. Why aren't those equal priorities? What the ecological accounting process does is it looks at the worth of ecological services. So why do we use the term worth? That's what reflects the community appreciation of ecological services and what may be invested in those services. Often communities have streams, which is the most common ecological service. They use some of the values, ecological values that are available, but they may overlook them and leave them on the table, as it were. Okay. What are ecological services worth? As I said, it's a measure of use. Are the opportunities recognized? And are they maintained and managed? That's a critical thing. Because if a community does see this package of ecological services and take advantage of it, they will be compelled to maintain and manage. There's three realities about watersheds. Ecological systems depend on hydrology. From one view, hydrology is water pathways. Water moves downhill and it doesn't care who owns the land or whether it's private or public. And the watershed in reality should be the reference or spatial reference for communities in order to maintain, which means prevent degradation, and manage, which means enhance the condition, the functioning condition of an ecological resource such as a creek shed. One of the ideas that's basic to the ecological concept, ecological accounting process concept, is the commons. What are the commons? Well, those are places in the community that everyone has a right to access and draw value from. They add to quality of life. They add to property value. There are two kinds of commons. There's a natural commons and there is a constructed commons. Natural commons, we're familiar with them in terms of streams, ponds, wetlands, salmon, woodlands, and so on. Those natural commons provide intrinsic services for nature, and they provide services that are used by communities. The constructed commons is familiar to us as roads, drainage systems, storm sewers, and potable water systems, and so on. Some of these services that we call constructed common services overlap with our natural commons. So very often a storm drainage system releases its water into the local stream and it's conveyed away. So let's look at the Brooklyn Creek analysis quickly, where we use the ecological accounting process to look at the watershed. The focus was the town of Comox, which has jurisdiction in the lower portion of the watershed. Three departments in the town of Comox collaborated, as did the Brooklyn Creek Watershed Society and various organizations in the community, including local businesses. The watershed, as I mentioned, has three areas. The upper section is in the city of Comox. Land use decisions there in the past have made that part of the watershed. It's subordinated all of the ecological services to engineering strategies. The middle watershed is largely a rural subdivision area, and the long-established subdivision of land with roads and ditches and so on has really interrupted the interflow of the top meter of the soil in the watershed. And the lower part of the watershed is in the town of Comox, and that's where we were looking at the community investment in the worth of the watershed. Brooklyn Creek was done in a series of projects. Now here's a photo of an area that was later enhanced, and on the left you see the thicket, and the stream is in there. This is after the enhancement was carried out in this particular section of the stream over a 2-year period. And the strategy for this, which was very successful, was have a long-term plan, have your collaborators agree to that plan. So over 11 years, from 2006 to 2017, about $800,000 was invested in restoration work, really which is maintenance and enhancement. The town of Comox put up 40% of the required cash, other funders 40%, and donated and in-kind services about 20%. So there was a lot of leverage to the advantage of the local government to get this work done. The ecological accounting process also looks at the commons asset, as we call it, which is the ribbon of land that underlies the stream and encapsulates the adjoining riparian area. So in this map, what you're seeing is that zone imposed on platted properties. And what we did is we take those portions of each lot and we figure out what their value is based on the assessed value of the land in that particular adjoining parcel, whatever it is. These were all residential in this case. It comes from, the data is from BC Assessment Authority, and that data really reflects the interest of buyers when they make a property purchase or a property sale. So whatever it is that buyers value about a particular lot, in aggregate with a number of properties, you get a view of, well, people like to be in this part of the city, or they don't like to be in this part of the town, and so on. We found those values for the portions of the lots that were in the setback area. We used those values to tell us what that portion of the setback area was worth. We took 50% of that value as the commons, natural commons value. Now, this is not a perfect measure, but it is a way to have numbers that you could consistently gather, so you could be able to understand that your stream corridor or your natural asset area has a land value. Once you get to that point, you're able to talk about, well, how much should we spend on maintenance annually? So we found in our example, the stream was worth $2,700 per lineal meter. It was worth $2.7 million per kilometer. The stream length in the town of Comox is 2.5 kilometers, I think it is. So it has a value of $6.8 million. At 1% a year for maintenance, you'd be spending $68,000 to look after the stream. If you were doing enhancement, you might be spending more. So if you get these numbers, you also have an opportunity to contribute to asset management strategy and planning. In a sense, it's useful to have capital value amounts for the constructive commons and the natural commons, so you have some way of comparing how you're devoting resources to one or another. And typically, we do not have any asset value for the natural commons. So the purpose of the ecological accounting process is to help get numbers that can be used. And we've designed it so that communities can employ this process on their own if they choose to do that. They have the GIS data available, they have the stewards to work with, they have their own staff to work with, and they can hire consulting capacity where they need it. So I'd just like to thank the stewardship community for being the champions for the natural commons. And I'd like to thank, I'm missing a slide here. I'd also like to thank the people in local government who take the time to look at these issues and think about how they can contribute to another way of understanding ecological services, managing those services, and understanding the role of those services in the prosperity of their communities. Thanks.